President. I rise on behalf of the Greens to indicate that we will be supporting the local government amendment disqualification from Civic Office Bill 2017. It was in June last year where the Greens first put the legislative proposition to this chamber to ban property developers and ban real estate agents from sitting from taking civic office as local councillors. And we did that in the course of one of the government's pretend reform bills on local government. And I will deal with the train wreck that is the Coalition's attack on local government a little later in the second reading speech. But one of those stops towards the train wreck was last year when the government brought forward some legislation that they pretended was reform of local government. And if they'd ever gone out and listened to the people of New South Wales, if they'd ever spoken to a single resident from Auburn, or they'd spoken to a single resident from Warringah, or they'd spoken to residents in Parramatta, and they'd said to them, what's the one thing you want us as a government to do for local government? What's the one thing you could ask for? And I've done this at public meetings. We've had public meetings talking about local government reform and, you know, the misery that is the government's so-called reform agenda. And you have a packed meeting and you say, what's the one thing the government could do for you, for local government, to make local government better? Do you know what they say? Almost to a person. They say, kick off the property developers and kick off the real estate agents from local government. Kick off the property developers, get rid of the real estate agents, and that is the first best thing you could do to clean up local government. And they don't say, supersise my council. They don't say, sack all my local elected reps and put in place a hand-picked administrator. They don't say make planning laws far more complicated and deliver more benefits for property developers. They say kick off the property developers and kick off the real estate agents. And that's why we moved the amendment in June of last year to do exactly that. The first time it was put to this parliament. And what did the government do? They said, oh, you can't pick on the poor property developers. You can't kick on the poor real estate agents. They fund our federal party. You can't stop the rivers of gold that they rely upon at a federal level from property developers and real estate agents. And they refused it. They refused it point blank. This is a government that pretends it wants to fix local government. This is a government that's been smashing local government uphill and down dale, but not doing the one big fix that'd make a difference. And then we get government speaker after government speaker coming up and say, oh, you can't stop one class of person from entering civic office. You know, you can't be unfair to the property developers. They've got a right to get on government just like everybody else. The next thing, we'll see the government members come back and say, well, you can't stop vampires working at the blood bank. You've got to get property developers off local government. You've got to get the real estate agents off local government. They have such an obvious conflict of interest. They have such an obvious conflict of interest.
Now you've gone too far, Peter.
It's outrageous. They have such an obvious conflict of interest. And if they're not getting a deal for their exact council, you can have a property developer on Council A and another property developer elected onto Council B, and rather than change the planning laws or vote on a DA in their own local council area, they can just do deals that cut across council, from Council A to Council B. It's happening all over Sydney, and they just don't care. Well, the people of New South Wales care. The Greens have cared for well over a decade to get the property developers, get the corrupting influence of the property industry out of local government, and that's why we support this bill. Stop attacking local government. Stop wasting hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars in sacking councils, supersising councils, spending money on new badging and new IT and destroying local government, and do the first best thing you can do. Support the bill. You should have supported the Greens amendment when we moved it last year, and let's finally kick off the developers, kick off the real estate agents out of council so they can never be elected again, and let's really take a serious step about sorting out local government in this state.